Earlier this week, Texas Governor Greg Abbott issued an executive order that would have allowed Texas state troopers to pull over and in some cases seize vehicles suspected of carrying immigrants from the southern border to their final destinations in the United States. Now, the order would have prevented nonprofits and other private contractors relied on by the federal government from transporting migrants inside the U.S. as their legal cases wind their way through the courts. The Biden administration immediately threatened federal action, with Attorney General Merrick Garland calling Abbott's order dangerous and unlawful. Now this evening, the Justice Department has followed through, suing the state of Texas to try to stop that executive order from going into effect. This federal intervention is a positive sign for Texas Democratic legislators who are hoping that the federal government will aid them in their quest to fight back against attempts by Texas Republicans to push through a restrictive voting law. 3 days ago, former Texas Congressman Beto O'Rourke and civil rights activist Reverend Dr. William Barber set out with about 100 other activists on a march to protest Republican attempts to roll back voting rights in that state. Throughout March, they've made clear what they think that's the only way to protect voting rights in Texas, and it's for lawmakers in Washington to enact new federal voting rights legislation.
We are at the end of day 3, so just did about 10 miles. The last stretch from Georgetown to Austin, which in total is 27 miles. Tomorrow is literally the last mile of the whole march, making sure that we end the filibuster and certainly at a minimum change it so that you can pass voting rights legislation. That's what we're marching for. That's what we're rallying for tomorrow.
That's what we're marching for. This march through Texas is the latest in a series of direct actions from activists across the country to try to pressure Washington lawmakers to pass major voting rights legislation by any means necessary. And so far, they've at least succeeded in keeping it on the Democrats' agenda. This afternoon, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Leader Chuck Schumer met with President Biden to discuss a path forward for federal voting rights legislation. But what does that path forward look like? And what will activism like we've seen in Texas, do to force Democrats to find a solution in Washington? Joining us now are former Texas Congressman Beto O'Rourke and the Reverend Dr. William Barber. Gents, thanks very much for being with you. Congressman O'Rourke, I'm going to start with you because you've been in Congress, and you have your Texas state representatives who have been testifying, talking to, meeting, having Zoom meetings with, begging, pleading, cajoling your federal colleagues, members of the House of Representatives, in particular senators, say, save us. We can be the tip of the sword here, but we need backup. It's like the Alamo. You got to come and help us. We can't hold out forever.
You're right. These Texas Democratic legislators have done more than we could have ever asked them to do. They've now left their offices in the Capitol. They've left their families, sometimes with very young children. They've left their homes. And they've taken this fight to the one place it can be won, our nation's capital, and specifically the U.S. Senate. And when they come back, they potentially face arrest. So now that Texas has done so much, and thanks to the Poor People's Campaign and Bishop Barber and this march that he and 40 allied organizations have led, and what we're doing in this state right now, Texas has done its part. And it's now time for the president and those Democrats in the Senate who have a political majority to do theirs. Amend the filibuster at a minimum and allow an exception for voting rights legislation so that we can pass every single provision of the For the People Act. That rolls back voter suppression in Texas and Georgia and Florida and so many other places, and it opens up our elections to every eligible voter. That's not a Democratic Party position nor a Republican Party position. That should be an American democracy position, and that's why we're marching, and that's why we want folks to join us in Austin tomorrow, 10 a.m. in front of the Capitol. We'll be joined by impacted people and Willie Nelson, who will be giving one of his first concerts since the pandemic there. So big day tomorrow in Austin.
Reverend Dr. Barber, I think in the last few weeks you've been arrested at least a couple of times. Doesn't scare you, doesn't scare the Texas representatives who are under threat of arrest. They've done nothing criminal, but the governor has implied that they could be arrested. That's what the summer of action is turning out to be. People marching, people putting their bodies on the line, doing what they have to do to remind people that this is the kind of energy that is required, very reminiscent of the civil rights movement. If you're going to get something done, you're going to have to raise public awareness and sort of force politicians to do what they have to do.
In our summer of action, over 200 people have now been arrested. 100 women a week ago, 39 people in at front of Cinema's office. But we had 125 max on who could march because of COVID. We could have had thousands of people. We had to turn them back. But listen, we've got to protect this democracy. If you have infrastructure for bridges, but then you allow the infrastructure of democracy to be torn down, you're not going forward, you're going backwards. We need to, not only just for the voting, we need to end the filibuster. We need to fully pass every provision of the John Lewis For the People's Act. That's the one he wrote. The Voting Rights Act hasn't been written. Restoration, when it is, past that. And then we need 15 now, and we need to protect our immigrant brothers and sisters. If you believe in those things fully, then you need to come to the rally. You know, 66 million people voted from mail-out ballots last time. 56 million people voted on times other than election day. That helped poor and low-wealth people. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce wants to control our elections. ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Group, wants to control. We can't allow that to happen. 65%, Alshie, of Texans either want to keep the access they have, and they had during the last election, or expand it. And so we need to understand, if you want access to the ballot, come to this rally. If you want living wages, come to this rally. If you're one of the 12.6 million poor and low wealth people, come to this rally. You want to hear poor and low wealth impacted people of every race, creed, and color cry out, come to this rally. You want to see Lucy Baines Johnson, the daughter of Lyndon Baines there, come to this rally and make Washington hear us and say, Mr. President, you must act now. Get in the room, make those Democrats come together and pass these things now. We need action from the president and Senator Schumer and the Democratic caucus.
Congressman O'Rourke, you've heard, of course, that the Senate, you talked about this, they're working on a narrower bill, another voting rights bill. Joe Manchin's involved in that. And activists would like to see that brought up and dealt with quickly, not because they want a narrower bill on voting rights, but they think it won't pass either. And then it'll increase the pressure on the president and Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin to do something now along the lines of what you were talking about. Carve out voting rights from the filibuster. So if you all want to keep your filibuster because you think it's all bipartisan and great, knock yourselves out. But you can't let states abridge people's legitimate constitutional right to vote.
That's absolutely right. And I am very grateful for Senator Raphael Warnock of Georgia, who I think has been instrumental in bringing the party together, including Senator Manchin. And it's really good news, and it's a sign of progress. And I think, frankly, it's a sign that what Bishop Barber, the Poor People's Campaign, and others who are willing to take direct, nonviolent action across this country, that what they're doing is actually working. It's bringing the parties to the table. They're feeling the pressure, and they know that they need to move forward. I would argue and agree fully with Bishop Barber that as important as the physical infrastructure of our country is, if we do not save the infrastructure of our democracy and protect the right to vote and guarantee free and fair elections going forward, we will very well lose it forever. And then nothing else is possible. Raising the minimum wage, expanding access to healthcare, confronting climate change, legalizing 11 million hardworking, undocumented immigrants in this country. All of those things that we want to do only become possible when we bring all voters into the polling place and ensure that their votes are counted and their voices are heard. So I hope that Senator Warnock and others who really believe in this continue to drive a hard bargain and maybe say, look, if you want my vote on infrastructure, if you want my vote on this budget deal, if you want my vote on something else, I'm going to have your leadership and your vote on passing democracy bills like the For the People Act. I think we need to be tough on this one, and we cannot be Charlie Brown with the football one more time. We've got to drive the hardest bargain possible. We cannot take no for an answer. Failure is not an option. Pass the For the People Act.
Reverend Barber, how many miles have you got left to walk tomorrow? When do you guys start, and how many miles left?
We got 1 mile to the Capitol. Then we're going to D.C. on Monday with over 1,000 pastors and clergy and low-wage workers. But I want to say this also. We don't need a narrow bill. We need the constitutional bill. We need what is right. We need hard, but don't settle for just anything. Let this pressure happen, because if it doesn't happen by August the 6th, the anniversary of the 6th anniversary of the signing of the Voting Rights Act, we're going to state capitals all over this country, starting in West Virginia. I am tired. We are tired of poor people and low-wealth people and black people and brown people and disabled people and Native people and Asian people and women and elderly people being treated like things, and corporations being treated like people. When they ask for trillions, they get every trillion. When we want something that's constitutional, it's always cut and narrow. We have to stop doing this. We can break that filibuster. They break it when they want to break it. We need to play hard. But I love what my brother Beto O'Rourke just said. You can't have one vote on infrastructure, on anything, until you deal with the infrastructure of this democracy. You can do both at the same time. But do not sell this democracy short, because we'll be right back here 2 years from now. And if Democrats don't meet this moment, this Lyndon Baines Johnson, FDR, Abraham Lincoln moment on voting rights, you will probably lose in 22 and 26, because you will have allowed states' rights to overturn constitutional rights and suppress the vote. It should not be, let's do the right thing and let's do it now.
Gentlemen, we'll be following the last mile of your walk very closely tomorrow. Stay safe, please, and thanks for the work you are doing on behalf of democracy. Former Texas Congressman Beto O'Rourke and the Reverend Dr. William Barber. Thank you.